Welcome to Grounded Not Divided, a podcast about leaders who are getting important things done in the real world. I'm Matt Burgess. My guests on this show all have hard-won real-world experiences. Experiences that shed light rather than heat on society's most vital issues. Today's episode is about artificial intelligence, or AI. ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Grok, AlphaFold, self-driving cars, mass automation, superintelligence. There seems to be a new AI story every week. The future of AI raises both awe-inspiring possibilities for progress and existential questions about the future of humanity. In this episode, I talk through some of these issues with Calum Chace, the AI guy. Calum Chace started out as a journalist, working for the BBC, the Financial Times, and Forbes, before becoming an entrepreneur, investor, and futurist. He has written 5 books on AI, including Surviving AI and The Economic Singularity, and he co-hosts the London Futurist podcast. We are also joined in the conversation by University of Wyoming economics PhD student Finbar Curtin. Finbar Curtin studied electrical engineering before coming to UW, and he is doing his PhD research on the economic and environmental impacts of AI. Calum Chace, Finbar Curtin, welcome to Grounded Not Divided.
It's great to be here, guys.
Likewise.
So there's a lot going on in the world right now, as you both probably noticed. And one of the things where there's been, I think, some really interesting developments that maybe are going under the radar just because of everything that's going on in politics and geopolitics is artificial intelligence, AI. There's been some really interesting developments there. And I happen to know an AI guy, two actually, as a PhD student of Finbar Curtin and Calum Chace, who I think is called the AI guy, right, in some circles.
Yeah, a friend of mine who got annoyed with me ranting about AI said, "Oh yeah, you're the AI guy." And I thought that's such a brilliant title, I decided to adopt it.
Yeah, and it stuck. And so I met Calum at this thing called Renaissance Weekend. There's no chainmail involved, but look it up if you want to know what it is, because it's sort of hard to explain. And he gave some fascinating presentations about AI. And so I wanted to have him come on this podcast and demystify some of what's going on for you all. But first, let's do a little bit of introduction. Describe your career. How did you get from journalism to business to being the AI guy?
So I counted it the other day. I think I'm on my 9th career. I started out as a journalist with the BBC World Service and went into marketing and sales, and then went into strategy consulting and became director and CEO of a green tech turnaround. But I retired in 2011, and I'm not very good at retiring, it turns out, which might be because I don't play golf. I was fascinated by AI. I've been interested in the idea all my life, but I've been particularly fascinated since 1999 when I read Ray Kurzweil's book, Age of Spiritual Machines. And he introduced me to the extraordinary idea that superintelligence might arrive during my lifetime. I'd always thought there would be superintelligence, but not for thousands of years.
And so, sorry to interrupt. This is a general audience podcast. This is the first episode on AI. Can you define superintelligence for us?
Sure, easy. It is an entity which is smarter than an adult human in every way. There's a related concept called artificial general intelligence, which you'll hear a lot. That simply means an AI which is at the same level as humans in all cognitive respects. It'll be much smarter than humans in some respect, but there's it's at least as good as a human in every respect. Superintelligence is beyond that. And a superintelligence could be 1,000,000 times smarter than the smartest human that ever lived.
And that's pretty fascinating, and we'll get into a little bit later why some people think that's really scary and other people think that's really exciting, and a few people think it might be both, or we don't know yet. But let's just talk first about what's the current state of AI. So let's just go down the list. Most people have probably heard of ChatGPT and large language models, or LLMs. What are those, and what can they do today?
So large language models have been around as far as availability to all of us, to the public, for 2-3 years now. They stem from a development which was done in Google in 2017 when they introduced a type of AI called transformers. Large language models are really remarkable. People often say it's like having a new graduate or perhaps a new PhD at your disposal who is super smart, super keen, can work at incredible speed, makes quite a lot of mistakes, and you have to check everything they do. They can write an email for you. They can write a book for you. They can précis a document. Could be an article. Again, could be a book. They can do much more than that, though. They can these days they can go off into the internet and find out information for you. You can ask it any question, and it'll give you an answer much better than Google search will. Sorry, Google. In that it'll give you the exact answer that you want, not a list of 10 links that you have to search for. But also you can have conversations with it and it can diagnose situations for you. I know people who use them as therapists and who have LLMs advise them on how to handle tricky situations. So they're remarkably capable researchers and information gatherers and information suggesters. What they can't do at the moment is they can't impact the real world. They can't take over your computer, move the mouse around, use the keyboard in order to, for instance, book a plane ticket. That's called AI agents or agentic AI, and that's coming this year. We already have some basic ones, but they're going to get a lot better. I think actually it'll be a while before most of us trust an AI to book a plane ticket without doing some supervision along the way, because you could end up having your holiday in Antarctica with just a swimsuit. But they are going to have a big impact in the real world. And I think it's worth putting this in some context. The story of AI goes back to 1956, and like all good things, it started in America in a summer seminar at Dartmouth College. And right from the beginning, there were two types of AI. There was artificial neural networks, which back then were called perceptrons. They were modeled very, very loosely on the human brain. And there was another way, another approach to AI called symbolic AI, which was like reasoning, which attempted to provide machines with kind of like a dictionary for human speech and thought, and gave machines explicit instructions. For a while, perceptrons, artificial neural networks, looked like they were going to be the most successful approach. And then in about 1968, I think, Marvin Minsky wrote a book which appeared to prove they couldn't possibly work. So they died. They died until actually 2012. And symbolic AI was all the rage, and expert systems were kind of the height of that in the 1980s. What happened in 2012 was Jeff Hinton, who's a British researcher who spent his career in North America. He used an algorithm called backpropagation to make artificial neural networks successful, make them work. That was in 2012. That was the first big bang in AI. And the really big thing that happened was that deep learning, which was a sort of a rebranding of artificial neural networks, deep learning started to make money. And that's really the acid test. Does it make money? And so Google and Facebook basically stole the advertising industry from the mainstream media. Mainstream media is not very happy about that, which is why one of the reasons why big tech suffered a backlash, because they've got all of the journalists against them now. So large language models, ChatGPT and others, very, very powerful, but going to get a lot more powerful this year as they get agentic.
So let me ask one follow-up question, because you were talking about what can large language models do and not do. As I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, what they do fundamentally is recognize patterns in language and try to predict, the next word. And when they're trained on large fractions of the corpus of human historical writing, they can do that pretty well. But I've read, though, recently some people say that they're not actually that good at generating new ideas. They're very good at summarizing ideas that exist and having a conversation in a way that sounds like a person, but they're not yet very good at generating new ideas. There's also this new OpenAI research model. What can you tell us about that, and how close or far we are from these neural net prediction AIs generating new ideas?
So it's important to say that we don't really know how these things work. We've got some ideas and there are different views. Jeff Hinton, I guess, probably knows as much as anybody about them. And he is very keen to say that large language models are not predictive text machines. So those of you who are old enough to remember, well, they're still around. If you type a message into your phone, you start writing somebody's name and the phone will decide, no, you don't want to do that. It'll give you another word and it will divert you off into a word that you didn't intend to write, which can be very annoying. That's predictive texting or predictive text. And that works by statistically analyzing language and knowing that if you have, say, the cat sat on there's a 99.9% chance that the next word is going to be Matt. That's how predictive text works. Hinton and others are very keen to point out that is not how large language models work. What they do is they apply numbers to tokens, and tokens are parts of words, and they can also do this with images as well. So they apply numbers to these tokens, and then they apply numbers to the relationships between the tokens, which are called vectors. And this process is called embedding. Now, an example of how that works is that the relationship between king and queen is very similar to the relationship between man and woman. And so the vector between those two pairs of words could be quite similar. So they apply these numbers to the corpus of language that they ingest, and they ingest most of the internet. And this means they do actually have a model of the language. And so they do what they say on the tin. It's a large language model. They're very large. I mean, these things are trained on, as I say, enormous corpuses of data, and they cost a fortune to train. OpenAI's biggest, best one, GPT-4o, cost about $100 million to train. So they do understand language in a sense, and you say understand with scare quotes because they're not conscious. We're pretty sure they're not conscious, and so they don't understand language in the same way that we do. But they have a model of language. Now, people say that they make mistakes all the time. They hallucinate. The proper word for it is confabulation, and it's true, they do. And you do have to check their outputs. I mean, people have had a nasty time by failing to check the outputs, but actually, so do we. You know, we confabulate in just the same way. We think that our common sense understanding of how our memory works is that we've got these filing cabinets with all our memory stored in them. And when we want to retrieve a memory, we send a little homunculus off and he goes and fetches the memory. That isn't how our memories work. We make up our memories as we go along. If you think about a street that you often drive down, you will create that street. You'll create a model of that street in your mind as you're trying to remember it. And that's what large language models appear to do. So Hinton and others are keen to say that large language models are quite similar to what we do. There's an awful lot that we do that they can't. They don't have volition. They're not agents yet. They don't have a very good world model. So they're a long way short of us at the moment. But of course, AI is moving at a cracking rate. And who knows how long it'll take for them to close that gap.
Okay, before I get into things related to the cost of training, right, which is really Finbar's area of interest, looking at the intersection of AI and economics and the environment, I want to ask about video. How close are we to being able to ask an AI to make a video, what we call a deep fake, of people saying things they didn't actually say, right? Or ask AI to generate a live action motion picture. How that's indistinguishable from a real one. How far away are we from that?
Well, I want to say we're there, and we are if you limit the video to a minute or so. They can't make a movie yet. I mean, I think there are people who have made short movies, and they're dreadful. The stories don't hang together, and they're boring. But if you want to make a little video of, I saw a while ago now a wonderful little video of two kind of age of exploration ships, big sailing ships, sailing around in a cup of coffee, and it was photorealistic accurate. And this was a video. You can make little videos of whatever you want. So we're there. Deep fakes are there now.
Okay, one more before we get into energy. Self-driving vehicles. That's a huge concern for job displacement in the United States because there's actually several states in the US where the single largest employer of men is trucking. So how close are we to self-driving cars and trucks?
We're there. So we have self-driving cars rolling around in San Francisco and Phoenix and Austin. They've been, I think I read that Waymo, which is by far the leader in America, which is a spin out of Google, uh, gave more rides in its self-driving cars in San Francisco last month than Lyft, the number two peer-to-peer Lyft, peer-to-peer taxi company. So these things are there. There's nobody in the front seat, just a passenger in the back, and they have a much lower rate of accidents than humans. Now, Google is a smart company, and they're rolling these things out very, very slowly. They're going to start in Miami this year, and I think there's one town up north where they're venturing into less good weather territory. But I don't think they're going to open up rides to the general public yet. I'm frankly surprised at how slowly Google is proceeding now that it does have proof of not beyond proof of concept, proof of proof. It works. It works, and it works commercially. But they are rolling it out slowly. It's been the great kind of prize of the future, and all of us in the sort of community of people who think about the future of AI have been surprised how slowly it's gone. Not just Elon Musk, but him above anybody else. He's been saying full self-driving would be available in Teslas every year since 2016, and it hasn't happened yet. And it's still not there in Teslas. But it's happened very slowly. And yet, as you say, in some measurements, truck driving is the biggest occupation in America. So you'd think that truck drivers would be getting worried, but there's still a shortage of truck drivers. And actually, what's probably going to happen, because there's always little unexpected eventualities where having a human on hand to sort things out is helpful. What's probably going to happen is trucks are going to have self-driving capability, and the driver will be in the truck. But because a human driver can only drive for 8 hours every 24 hours, you only get a third of the use of a truck. Whereas with a self-driving technology, you can have the truck driving 24 hours a day. So that's going to be a huge advantage. And there are various companies developing that, including one run by Sterling Anderson, who you and I met at the Renaissance meeting, Aurora. So that's going to be, I think, a big thing. We probably will come on to the future of jobs more generally. But so I don't think that self-driving technology is going to put that many people out of work for a while, partly because of this very slow conservative rollout.
Fascinating. So Finbar, let me throw it to you. One of the things that people are talking a lot about in AI is energy. What are the concerns there, and what are the hopes there, maybe?
Yeah, so I feel like there are, there is the AI demand, the energy that AI demands itself through the chips, through the training, through the inference. But there's also this question of economic growth. So if AI makes the economy wealthier, more productive, the economy will grow and will use more energy. So let's start with the first one, the energy that AI actually uses. So, in a recent Department of Energy report, data centers consumed around 4% of electricity in America in 2023. But they're expecting that over the next 3 years, this might jump to as much as 12%, and that data centers might even use as much power as Germany uses, like the country as a whole. That is a monumental addition to the grid. So this is happening simultaneous to the reshoring of manufacturing in America, uh, people switching to electric vehicles, people electrifying heating in their homes. This seems like a real challenge to add all of this energy demand to the infrastructure that we currently have. So, do you think energy is a potential bottleneck for the wide scale implementation of AI? And coming back to questions of the environment and climate change, do you think that this could be a headwind for decarbonization? Or maybe it could even be a tailwind? What do you think?
So I'm not an expert on the energy side of it, but it's a very good and important question. It seems to me that there's some steps missing in the numbers you just quoted, and I think they are what people usually say. So as I understand it, yeah, data centers account for somewhere around 4.5% of electricity demand in the US. Now, I don't know how much of data center usage is AI. I'm guessing it's probably a quarter. Maybe it's more. I don't know, but that sounds about right to me. And also, electricity isn't all of energy. Electricity is, I think, 20% of the energy use of the US. And if that's right, if those two assumptions are right, then AI now accounts for 0.22% of energy demand in the US. Now, it's growing fast, but you've got to grow fast for a long time to make a number like 0.22% really, really significant. Now, what the people who run the data centers, who are the big tech companies and the energy companies that work with them, they are planning for this, and they're planning to spend vast amounts of money on new energy creation centers. And they're going to use nuclear and they're going to use alternatives because they've all got zero carbon policies and promises and commitments. Now, of course, in the current political environment, they may say, phooey, we don't care about those commitments anymore. We've been liberated. We can do what the hell we like and we can pollute the world. Who cares? I don't think they're likely to do that. So if they do generate the extra energy they need with nuclear and with alternative energy, then it doesn't seem to me to be a massive problem. But I could be wrong, and I'm sure that there's a lot of conservation-minded people out there right now who want to kill me. Apologies for that.
So let me ask you both a follow-up question, and that is about energy efficiency. So one of the conversations from the Renaissance conference that we met at, Calum, that really stuck with me was with you when you were talking about how the human brain operates on something like the power of a light bulb. And so there's probably massive untapped energy efficiency potential in AI. And then, of course, super intelligence, if and when we find it, can massively increase our innovation rate potentially. And so how do you two see, regardless of how big or small the total footprint is now, the trend in the footprint, as the demand for power and processing interacts with the possible supply of efficiency innovations? Calum, you go first, and then Finbar.
Okay, so it's true that large language models are energy hungry as well as being data hungry and hardware hungry. And there are alternative computing and AI architectures, and probably the best known one is called neuromorphic computing. And the difference between neuromorphic and standard architecture, you could call it von Neumann architecture after John von Neumann, the Hungarian polymath who helped design the current architecture for computers. The difference is that in a human brain, our neurons, each of our neurons fires very rarely. They only fire when they absolutely need to. And they fire when a piece of information comes through the system which is relevant to them. Incredibly, we have neurons in our brains which are dedicated to very niche tasks. So there is something called the grandmother cell. You've got a neuron in your head which is responsible for recognizing images of your grandmother in real life and in photographs. So that neuron will fire only if it sees something relevant to your grandmother. In a traditional computing architecture, every single neuron fires every time there is any kind of calculation, which means that there's a humongous amount of calculation going on. And there is a community of people who are working on neuromorphic software and neuromorphic hardware. This is an idea that's not new. It's been around since the 70s, I think. Carver Mead was the first person to start talking about it. And nobody's made it work yet. The Department of DARPA, the defense outfit, gave quite a lot of money to IBM and a couple of other organizations. IBM created a system called True North, and then Intel had a go, and they have a chip called Loihi. But nobody's made it work at scale yet. But people are working on it. And in fact, the startup that I'm part of, which is called Contium, we are developing some neuromorphic software because we think maybe the time is right for neuromorphics. And actually also, and we may come onto this, it helps us explore our primary purpose, which is machine consciousness. But yeah, so neuromorphic software and hardware is one possible way to make these systems much, much more efficient. And human ingenuity being what it is, I think it's almost inevitable that the enormous costs of these systems will come down. That's just the way technology works. Everything starts out ridiculously expensive, fantastically wasteful, and then gets a hell of a lot cheaper and more efficient as time goes on.
Finbar, what's your take?
So we have two competing effects here, right? So we've seen this past month the market, tech stocks get rocked by the release of DeepSeek's R1 model, which used way less energy. I think they spent $6 million
That's what
training
they said.
R1.
Yeah.
That's what they said. There's maybe some skepticism around that number, whereas OpenAI maybe spent between 100 and $1 billion. No one really knows the amount, but R1 competes with OpenAI's O1 model, and inference costs, the costs it takes to run the model, are also 95% less. So we're seeing efficiency gains at the micro level here. But at the same time, OpenAI has announced, they haven't released it yet, but their O3 model, which has tremendous performance gains. It's scored in the 80% on the ARC, the ARC AGI benchmark, whereas O1 scored, I think, 37%. So this is a tremendous leap in performance. But at the same time, it uses between $20 and even over $1,000 of electricity per task to get that high number. So I do see efficiency gains being made with the architecture of LLMs, but I also worry that if the performance gains increase at a faster rate, we might just see more energy being used. So that's my take on the micro level.
So let me ask you both a related question. It's not just energy that people are talking about in terms of resources and scarcity. It's also base tech like chips, supercomputing chips, rare earth minerals. How scarce do you think those things are in the 10 to 20 year outlook of AI?
Well, there's going to continue to be a race for the bottleneck resources, and chips are a bottleneck resource, not least because America is the place where the best chips get designed. They mostly get made in Taiwan, and America is keen to prevent its enemies and potential enemies, China number one, from getting hold of them. DeepSeek is a Chinese outfit, and they did actually have a lot of NVIDIA chips. They didn't have the very latest type, but they had the sort of a pretty recent type. And of course, today, at the moment, America isn't quite sure who its friends and enemies are. So maybe everybody's going to have a hard time getting hold of the chips. But that's the way things go when you're developing a new technology, a new platform. There are bottlenecks, and you race to free that up. You get more competition. There are other people coming in trying to replace NVIDIA or try to challenge NVIDIA as the sole provider of cutting edge chips. So just as there's a race to create more energy, there's a race to create more chips.
Let me ask just Finbar a specific question then about rare earth minerals. So you mentioned the, currently in flux U.S. foreign policy. One of the things that's been in the news a lot in the United States and Canada is the President Donald Trump talking about Canada becoming the 51st state and trying to annex it. And at first, people thought he might be joking. And recently, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, was caught on a hot mic at a business group saying he doesn't think it's a joke. He thinks that President Trump is serious about wanting to annex Canada. And he thinks that the reason is the access to Canada's resources, particularly of rare earth minerals. So what, if anything, does that have to do with AI and other types of computing and security issues? Finbar.
So I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the application of rare earth minerals in the chip production. I do know there's some experimental semiconductors that do use rare earth minerals that potentially may see energy efficiency gains. The switching of transistors just uses less energy, but nothing that I'm aware of right now um, is dependent critically on minerals, like at the large scale for the production. But one thing I do know is that the high quality quartz that is used for polysilicon crucibles, 70 to 90% of that quartz comes from one town in North Carolina. And so, just talking about bottlenecks in the semiconductor industry, that's a huge bottleneck. Um, ASML is the only company in the world that manufactures the extreme ultraviolet lithography manufacturing equipment that is needed to make these most advanced chips. Like Calum said, TSMC is a Taiwan company, and they produce 90% of the world's most advanced chips. And NVIDIA holds 95% of the as far as the final product uh, market for these advanced chips. So I can't really speak to rare earth minerals, but there's a ton of bottlenecks here that play favorably to the United States. But these also potentially create weak points for supply chain disruptions. So this mine in North Carolina was hit by the hurricane this fall, and they had to shut down production temporarily. It all worked out in the end, but I do wonder if this fragile supply chain could, create some barriers towards AI, just an AI revolution to take off for the world to get the chips that it needs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it sounds like North Carolina better start putting up lots of flags just in case Trump mistakes it for an unfriendly nation and decides to invade it. And also Holland, which is where ASML, the company that makes the machines that make chips, and as you say, it's the only one in the world that can do extreme lithography, that maybe Holland needs to worry about being invaded as well. But of course, the country that really needs to worry about it is Chile, because Chile has a lot of the world's lithium, and lithium is perhaps the most hard to replace rare earth in the kind of the whole sort of computing area. It's a key ingredient of batteries. But I think over and over again in the history of technology, we've seen human ingenuity work its way round, through, over, underneath bottlenecks. Famously, in 1980, there was a bet between Paul Ehrlich and Julian Simon. Paul Ehrlich was an environmentalist who was saying that we were going to run out of 5 of the most important minerals that we needed for manufacturing processes. And Julian Simon, who was an economist, said, no, we won't. We'll find new sources, we'll find new ways of getting at those sources, and we'll find workarounds. And Simon was right and Ehrlich was wrong. Ehrlich paid the bet, and he continues to say exactly the same thing at his University of California, which is the great triumph of tenure. So, yeah, there's going to be bottlenecks, but I think we will find ways around them. We always do. That sounds probably very complacent, but I think it's true.
So shifting gears a little bit, and first quickly, to be fair to the current president, he's been very clear that he does not plan to send troops into Canada, and just plans to put economic and political pressure on Canada to join the United States. But shifting gears, let's talk about the economics of AI. So when DeepSeek did their big reveal recently, Olivier Blanchard, who used to be the chief economist of the IMF and was also, after that, the president of the American Economic Association, so one of the most respected, famous economists in the world, referred to DeepSeek as potentially the start of the greatest productivity growth jump in human history. I'd love to hear from both of you. Do you think he's right? And why or why not?
I'm not a really deep expert in DeepSeek, and to be honest, I don't think we know. I don't think the community knows exactly how they did what they did. But I'm pretty confident that that wasn't a one-off leap which will never be repeated. I think it was a progressive step forward, and there'll be many more to come. What DeepSeek did, as far as we can make out, is they applied a form of machine learning which is not deep learning to large language models, and this is called reinforcement learning. Now, this is not new. It's how Google DeepMind achieved a lot of its great successes. For instance, with the Atari video game, which got them $400 million of Google's money for DeepMind before they had any revenues, never mind any profits. And they applied the architecture is a mixture of expert systems, so it's a kludge of different systems, and also they appear to have done something called model distillation, which means that the DeepSeek R1 particularly learned from existing models. Now, OpenAI pointed this out as a way of saying, actually, this may not be as much of a breakthrough as it looks like. And I think a lot of people misunderstood that OpenAI was complaining that DeepSeek had copied it. And there was a lot of schadenfreude because people said, well, hey, you've been copying everybody's stuff off the internet. It's about time it happened to you. I'm not sure that that's really what OpenAI was saying. So what DeepSeek did was significant. It was remarkable. And, the chap who founded it, Liang Wenfeng, is a very smart guy, very successful hedge fund manager in China. But I don't think it's kind of, a seismic moment. Mark Andreessen said it was an AI Sputnik moment. I really don't think that's likely to work out to be the case. Significant advance, yes, but there's going to be many more.
Yeah, I would say it is a productivity increase. It might end up being a productivity increase insofar as these large language models end up being a productivity increase. So it seems that the hype around DeepSeek really came from how it was made very cheaply and very efficiently. But as far as its capabilities, it's not tremendously better than OpenAI's O1. So I think the argument that it will end up being this huge boost to productivity really rests on whether LLMs, as they are now at this level, end up being a huge boost to productivity.
Yeah.
So let me ask kind of a related question about health. One of the other optimistic hopes that I've read for the future of AI is that we're closer than we think to having AI generated cures for diseases like cancer. There's already these companies that can predict really accurately how proteins are going to fold in AI. It's not that hard to imagine companies like that, downloading the whole human genome and very quickly generating kind of candidate cures for things like cancer that have dogged the medical community for years. What's you guys' take?
I think it's inevitable that AI is going to enable remarkable progress in medicine. You mentioned the models which can predict how proteins fold. The way proteins fold determines how they react with other proteins, with other molecules. And so DeepFold, which is the Google DeepMind model that does this, I think they're on DeepFold. I think they're on DeepFold 3 at the moment, or maybe it's 2. They've got models. They can now detect the behavior not only of every protein used in life on Earth, but every molecule used in life on Earth now. So it's really quite a remarkably powerful tool. So every biologist, every medical biologist is using this tool. And another thing that people are doing with AI is that they are inventing molecules which are likely to be suitable targets for drugs, and then inventing molecules which will be drugs to attack those targets. And that's happening. And so drug discovery, drug invention is now much faster and much quicker. And critically, there are fewer failures. That's really the most important bit of it. That's already happening. Unfortunately, most of the cost in developing a drug is in testing it. And at the moment, there's no substitute for testing it in, first of all, in animals. You do it in silico first. You do it with simulations in models, and then you do it in animals, and then you do it in humans. And particularly when you're doing it with humans, it takes years. And there's no way yet to replace that process. That will probably come. We'll probably have eventually the FDA saying, yes, I can see you've done elaborate testing in these simulations. No humans ever touched it, but it's worked out in the simulations, and therefore we'll approve it for sale. But we're not there yet. So it's kind of, there's a lot of progress being made. You can't see a lot of it yet. Human biology is unbelievably complicated. We thought when the genome was decoded that, oh, okay, we now have the secret to life. We've read the book of life. It turns out that was just the start, and there's many orders of magnitude more complicated than we thought. But AI and its incredible ability to analyze data is what's going to get us there.
So, follow-up question for Finbar. Suppose that the vision of health AI optimist is realized and we get these quicker candidate cures or treatments for a lot of diseases that currently frustrate us. Is that obviously that's a big deal for health? Is that also a big deal for the economy? Why or why not?
That's a good question. I'm sure there's some study out there that looks at lost working hours due to illness or life expectancy. And so you could imagine just on creating a healthier populace, a healthier workforce, seeing productivity gains. But to add to what Calum said, I think it's important here to distinguish that when we talk about AI, we are really talking about all of the AI technologies. We're not just talking about large language models. Everyone right now is focused on ChatGPT and DeepSeek, but there are these other models, right? Like protein folding models and models that predict the weather and models that model reservoirs of fossil fuels, right? Like we are going to see productivity gains from all the advances of AI, not just LLMs. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with healthcare.
Okay, one last question for Calum
So,
on. Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
Can I just throw in? So, according to the Integrated Benefits Institute, illness-related lost productivity cost employers around $530 billion last year in the United States. And that is, by more than anything else, that's an illustration of the power of GPT-4.
Okay, wow. So one last question for you, Calum, on the optimistic side, and then we're going to talk about the AI doomsday kind of stuff. And that is a lot of people who follow AI closely use this word, the singularity, a lot. What is the singularity? And, do you think it's possible? And if so, how far away from it are we?
So a singularity is a term in maths and physics, and it's a term for where a variable becomes infinite. And because it becomes infinite, the rules of physics just break down. And the main place where this happens is in the middle of black holes. In a black hole, the gravitational field becomes infinite, and so the laws of physics just don't work anymore. It was applied first to human affairs by John von Neumann, who I mentioned before. And then it was picked up by a science fiction writer called Werner Vinge, who sadly died recently. And he said that in 30 years, I can't remember when he said this, in 1980 something, in 30 years, we will have machines which are so powerful that humans won't be able to compete with them. And basically, that superintelligence is going to take over. And then Ray Kurzweil picked that idea up, and he's become the sort of main progenitor of it. The singularity is the time when superintelligence arrives. And you maybe get an intelligent explosion. One day you've got a superintelligence which is just a bit smarter than the average human in every possible way. And then the next day or next week, you've got a machine which is 1,000,000 times more powerful cognitively. And in that eventuality, we become the chimpanzees in the picture. We lose control. Our future is no more in our control than chimpanzees are able to control their future. And personally, I think that is right. That is what's going to happen. And we might think that we can stop. We might think we can decide not to develop frontier models and very smart AIs, but we're not going to stop. And we might think we can control them. But you can't control an entity which is 1,000,000 times smarter than you. Not a chance. So we're going to find ourselves in a situation where our future is determined by the machines. And it'll probably either be very, very good or very, very bad. And you mentioned at the top that a lot of people are both scared and frightened. And I'm one of them. Because I think that the future could be disastrous. If the superintelligence decides that we're a threat, or it doesn't like us, or we're somehow in the way, we're collateral damage to some other project it has, that's it, toast for humans. But if it decides that it does like us, and it wants to help us flourish, then it could solve all our current problems, which would be rather nice.
So let me ask a follow-up question for you, Calum, and Finbar, feel free to weigh in also. So before I became an economist, I got a PhD in ecology and evolution. And I would say, I'm not an AI expert, but as somebody with a PhD in ecology and evolution, my prior is to be skeptical of ideas that even a super intelligent conscious AI would have motivations anything like humans, right? Our evolutionary history, our endocrine system, hormones, things like that, are so important to what we define as our objectives, to our emotions, to our Machiavellian tendencies. And so I have this default skeptical posture to any kind of futurism that anthropomorphizes AIs too much. So let me ask a specific question related to that. Is there any good reason to think that AIs would care if we turned them off, right? If we had left the instruction that we wanted to turn them off? And is there any good reason to worry about AIs not being open to us revising their directive and setting their directive? Calum, go ahead, and then Finbar, I'd love to hear your thoughts too.
There's both a theoretical and an evidentiary reason to be scared about those things. Firstly, any intelligence will have a goal, because the best definition of intelligence I know is that it's goal-directed adaptive behavior. So an entity is intelligent if it has a goal and it learns as it's pursuing that goal, and it changes its behavior to better achieve the goal. So goals are built into the concept of intelligence, and we give AIs goals at the moment, and they will create sub goals. So the classic example is, if I send an AI out to go and, a robot, an AI powered robot, send it out to go and get me a cup of coffee. It's got to do a number of things to achieve that goal. It's got to get itself from wherever it is to wherever the coffee is and back again. And it may decide that there are things in its way, and it would achieve its goal better if it got rid of those things. And some of those things may be humans. So there's a little old lady in the queue in front of it, and the robot's standing there, gets frustrated and zaps her, gets her out of the way. Goals mean sub-goals, and we don't always know what the sub-goals are. The other canonical example is you tell a very clever AI system to solve climate change, and it says, great, okay, I'll solve climate change. Get rid of humans. That's the quickest way to solve climate change. And so, yes, there are goals in any intelligent system. We give them goals. They will have their own goals, and those will involve sub-goals. That's theoretical. The practical evidential reason to be nervous about this is that we are already seeing machines making up their own goals and lying to us about what those goals are, and lying to us in order to improve the way they achieve those goals. So yeah, we should fully expect it. Now, their goals may not be like our goals. They won't be human goals. They are alien minds. They're more like us than we perhaps think, but they are going to be alien minds. But they will have goals, and they will cheat, deceive, lie in order to achieve them, just like we do.
So quick follow-up question before I throw it to Finbar. Is it correct to say then that you're more worried about what people call misalignment, where they try to pursue our goals, but accidentally, or not necessarily accidentally, but in ways that we didn't anticipate, do things that we don't like, as opposed to being worried about the Terminator or the Matrix scenario, where the super intelligent AI has a intrinsic lust for power that's similar to our humans' intrinsic lust for power, and uses that to dominate us? Is that fair?
I'm concerned about all the modalities of AI going spectacularly wrong. The one that makes me nervous most, I suppose, is the one where the AI neither loves you nor hates you. It just thinks it's got better uses for the atoms that you're made of.
Yeah, I think that's well put, Calum. I think it's important to emphasize that we don't need to anthropomorphize a super intelligence. We don't even need it to have consciousness in order to be worried about this misalignment problem. And when we're talking about giving an AI goals and giving it boundaries, we're also grappling with coding in the boundaries that are human values. But this is something that human cultures can't even agree on. So how is it that we can encode a super intelligence to act in this world, but also obey a set of boundaries that we can't even agree on as humans? And this is a question I've really been grappling with. I love the philosophical works of Nick Bostrom and Eliezer Yudkowsky, who kind of introduced this problem of misalignment to the world. And so I think this is something that politicians, everyone needs to become familiar with as we enter this age of AI.
Yeah, I
So let
mean,
me ask you both one more question about things we should be worried about. And that is not necessarily misalignment or the Machiavellian AI, but the AI that puts really dangerous tools in the wrong human hands. So we were talking about protein folding AIs that can develop cures to disease. What about a protein folding chatbot that can tell ISIS fighters how to make bioweapons? How concerned should we be about that? And are we closer to that than the misalignment or Machiavellian superintelligence? Or are we kind of running towards both at the same time?
yeah, I think we're running towards both at the same time. And it's not hard to imagine that in the not too distant future, a gruntled teenager will be able to create a pathogen which wipes out all girls or everybody over 6 foot. You know, um, there's an interesting line of argument that when technology is that powerful, we can no longer afford privacy, and the state is going to have total oversight over everything we do on a computer, so that that doesn't happen, so that the gruntled teenager doesn't wipe out half the human race, or the evil mafia boss or whoever. I don't think we should particularly prioritize um, human bad actors using advanced AI, or AI inadvertently or advertently causing massive amounts of damage. I think all of those things need to be worried about.
Okay, so let me ask both of you one more pessimism question that may seem quaint compared to these apocalyptic concerns we've just been talking about. But one of the big concerns that I've often heard in the context of AI is mass job displacement. We talked about trucking, and how Calum, you're not as pessimistic as some are about displacement of trucking. There's other people, like Tyler Cowen and Alex Tabarrok, whose macroeconomics textbook Finbar and I are currently teaching, who think that a bunch of new jobs will be created, like has happened with previous technological revolutions. So, is mass job displacement and mass unemployment, which don't necessarily have to go together, something we need to be worried about? And if so, how soon?
Yes, and I coined the phrase "the economic singularity" to mean the time when we have to admit, or when it becomes painfully obvious, that there are no jobs for humans. I am obviously a big admirer of Tyler Cohen's, but I don't understand how he doesn't agree that unless we stop developing AIs, they're going to get to a point where they can do everything that we can do for money, cheaper, better, and faster. And yes, jobs will be automated and new jobs will be created. It's just that the people doing those new jobs at that point won't be humans, they'll be machines. Now, if we do that, or rather, when we do that, if we somehow manage to figure out how to run an economy where nobody's doing a job, or virtually no humans doing a job, but all humans have access to a share of the incredible rich resources that are being produced. An economy that's fully automated by super smart AIs will be very, very productive, and it'll produce massive wealth. If we figure out a way to distribute that wealth, to share it around, we could have an absolutely marvelous world. Today, it's funny because most of the people who discuss this issue really enjoy their jobs. And we all busily forget the fact that most people don't. Most people do their jobs to put food on the table. And it may gives them some structure in their lives. It gives them something to call when they talk to people at parties. But they don't enjoy their jobs particularly, and they would love to not do them. They'd love to explore and play and have fun and get drunk and learn and do all sorts of other things, the things that they do when they're on holiday. That would be a better world. But the question of how we do the distribution of resources is a massive one, and we're not thinking about it. And it's terrifying because it could happen really quite soon. We really ought to be thinking more about that.
Finbar, what's your take?
I think it comes down to two things, which are the institutions that we have, how our economic system is structured, how our government is structured, and also how quickly this occurs. So there's a professor out of my alma mater, University of Virginia, Anton Koronek, and he is an AI economist. He's produced models to try and capture the behavior of the economic singularity. And what he sees is that it really does matter how quickly it takes off. If there's a slower takeoff, it could be that under our current economic system, that labor or people are able to grow wealth and ownership over the means of production, such that they aren't disenfranchised when the final human stops working. Uh, but that also, this question also depends on institutions, right? Do we have the institutions necessary to handle a extremely fast takeoff of the economic singularity? And I'm not, I don't want to, I'm not sure. I'm probably pessimistic, knowing the way things went during the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, I don't think we have the institutions, and I also don't think we have a plan. I mean, I wrote a book called The Economic Singularity, trying to figure out what the plan might be, and I could really only scratch the surface. Humans are very good at reacting urgently when there's a real crisis, but this one could be an absolutely not existential in the sense that every human will die, which is what we're looking at with a rogue, malicious AI, super intelligent AI. But civilization could collapse, and if civilization collapses, most of us die. I know, I personally, if the supermarket stopped serving food, I'm dead in 2 weeks because I have no idea how to go out and kill and skin a rabbit. So it could be very serious, and if we have no plan, it's a grim prospect.
So let me ask a couple of philosophical questions as we head towards the end of our time here. The first is, it seems to me that if the world were a single country, or maybe easier to imagine a world where only the United States exists.
Could happen soon.
If we take seriously the idea that you alluded to earlier, Calum, that there's maybe a 50% chance that super intelligent AI is great and solves all our problems, and there's a 50% chance that it destroys the world. My gut reaction to that is you have to take how good we have it for granted to kind of an incredible amount to not say, I don't want to take that gamble. However, that is in tension with the fact that we're not the only country in the world. And so if we start to severely restrict our development of AI, we're going to fall behind, malign foreign governments like China, which then, maybe is the worst of both worlds. The superintelligence risk still exists. And then also there's a competitive disadvantage that creates other kinds of risks. And I don't really know how to balance those considerations. How do the two of you think about these things?
There is no way to balance them. And actually, China is not the risk. You could imagine public opinion in America getting absolutely terrified about the prospect of superintelligence and demanding that the hyperscalers and everybody else stops working on them. And the same thing could happen in China, because in China, the government does not like unconstrained minds. However, there's also Russia and Korea and perhaps Iran. There's certainly very wealthy mafia groups, and there are the occasional rogue billionaire. These people have got tremendous resources. Now, right now, to create something smarter than GPT-4o3, you need a football field full of servers, you need very smart AI researchers, you need gargantuan amounts of data. But what we know is that the cost of building any given system is imploding all the time. It's just getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper at a hell of a rate. So in 10 years' time, the gruntled teenager may be able to build a superintelligence on their desktop. At that point, there is no way you can control it. I don't believe. I mean, there are very smart people, like I say, Max Tegmark, Stuart Russell, Jeff Hinton, Yeshua Bengio, very well-intentioned, super smart people who believe that perhaps we can hold the line at agentic AI and not make agentic AI. I just don't see that, because we're already doing it, and we'll do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. The thing about having a better AI than anybody you're in a competition with is you win. A better AI means you win. And if you're running a company, or if you're running a country, and above all, if you're running a military force, you're not going to pass up the opportunity to win. So I don't think we're going to stop. even though it is probably the right thing to do. I've done some very unscientific testing on this. During talks, I sometimes start by saying, I've got this big red button. And if I press this big red button, then there's a chance that you and your family will all live the most unbelievably wonderful lives, helped by superintelligence. But there's also a chance that everybody will die. And I can't tell you what the odds are. Do you want me to press the button? And like 99% of the audience go, no, don't press the button. It's the logical thing to do, but we're not going to do it because somebody else will press the button.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is the perfect example of a game theoretical trap, right? Right, the arms race. But I don't think you even need to look geopolitically to see it. Just looking at the companies in America, they are locked in this arms race to try and develop the next model, super intelligence, because they want to capture their share of the economic singularity. And the leaders of these companies are even crying out about the dangers of AI and how it could potentially be unsafe. Engineers are leaving in droves, claiming that these companies are not doing enough when it comes to safety. But in a way, they can't do anything because if OpenAI doesn't come up with the next model, then Google will. And if Google doesn't do it, then Anthropic will. And so we don't even have to look internationally to see the risks of this arms race. It's right here at home.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay, I have
absolutely.
two more questions. A philosophical one for Calum and then a philosophical one for both of you. So for Calum, the idea of AI consciousness. What is it? How far away from it are we, do you think? And what ethical issues does it raise?
So consciousness is a really hard thing to define, but we all know what it is. It's the experience of experiencing. As a famous philosopher, Ned Block, said, what's it like to be a bat? It's like something to be a human. We see red, we feel pain, we feel joy. These are experiences, and that's the experience of those experiences, that is consciousness. There's no reason, really, why consciousness can't exist in a silicon substrate as well as it can in a carbon substrate, which is what we are. Some people think that it's not possible, but it doesn't seem to me there's a sensible, logical reason why it can't. And it does seem that consciousness arises when there's a sufficiently complicated amount of information processing. So it is entirely plausible, I think, that in the next few years, possibly months, but probably years, we will develop machines that are conscious. Now, that could be important for a number of reasons. One is consciousness is just fascinating. It's probably the most important thing about it. So if having conscious machines helps us understand our own consciousness, then that's worth understanding. Secondly, more important than that, we must not create conscious entities and then torture them and enslave them and murder them over and over again. This is called mind crime, and it could be the worst thing humans have ever done. If we do create conscious machines and we either don't know they're conscious or we just disbelieve them when they tell us they're conscious, then that could result in terrible behavior. And of course, the opposite is also true in that we are inclined to believe that things are conscious even when they're not. I'm fairly convinced my car is conscious. I can't prove it. But so mind crime is an important issue. And I have a rather wacky idea. This is not the official view of my company, but it's my idea that if you had a choice between the first superintelligence being conscious or being non-conscious, I think you should choose the conscious one. Because a conscious superintelligence will understand what you mean when you say, I'm conscious, my consciousness is valuable, please don't make me suffer. A non-conscious machine will understand that in the theoretical way, but it won't really viscerally understand it. So I think you'll be in a better position if you've got a conscious superintelligence. And actually, I think that might be the one and only thing that we can do to tilt the scales between whether we get catastrophe or celebration.
Fascinating. Okay, last question for both of you, and that is, what about AI haven't we talked about yet, either in this episode or enough in society as a whole, that we should be talking about more?
Finbar, why don't you jump in there?
Yeah, I guess what I'm interested in regarding my research is the macro scale environmental and energy impacts of AI. So people really focus on the energy that the chips run, that the models need to train. But I'm really interested in how an AI boosted economy will interact with the environment and natural resources in the future. So if we expedite, improve current processes in our economy, but we don't necessarily make innovations that decouple our economic throughput from environmental harm, then we could see environmental harm continue to climb. We could see emissions continue to climb. We could see the depletion of finite resources. But on the other hand, if AI is able to generate new innovations that decouple our economic, the economic machine from environmental harm, then we could see a better future. So I think that is a missing question in the current discourse.
So I would like to take that positive note and make it really loud. So this idea will strike some people as horrifying, but I think our most hopeful future is one where we merge with superintelligence. It's one where superintelligence arises. It takes a look at us and says, well, you created me. I'm grateful for that. You are 9 billion really interesting little data generators. I find you very fascinating. Many of you, I've got serious problems, but you're very interesting, and I want to help you. And the way I'm going to help you is I'm going to invite you all to join me. You don't have to. You can stay as humans if you want. But those who want to, come on into the superintelligence mind. Join me. Join your minds to mine. And we're going to go and explore the cosmos. Death is an irrelevance. You can stop existing if you want, but you don't have to. You can carry on in this computational mindset for as long as you want. You've got virtually unlimited power. You've got power that the Greek and Roman gods would have, died to have. And we explore the cosmos and what Bostrom calls our cosmic, what's he call it? Not our cosmic inheritance, our cosmic endowment.
Maybe?
Yeah, cosmic endowment. Go off and find out the answers to life, universe, and everything for real. In a state of endless bliss. The upsides of superintelligence AI are rarely spoken of in any depth. People just say, oh, it could be great. I think it's worth having a think about just what that means. It's something better than heaven, I think, and quite mind-blowing. The alternative possibilities are pretty grim, but the upside potential is magnificent.
Well, let's end on that very optimistic note. Calum, Chace, Finbar, Curtin, thank you both so much for coming on Grounded Not Divided, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Grounded Not Divided. If you want to hear more episodes like this, be sure to subscribe for free on Apple, Spotify, or on the Guided Civic Revival Substack. You can also email us feedback at matt.burgess@uwyo.edu. See you next time.